can say the first one, we're going to do some additional planning, but we're going to review our plan and move forward with that.
When we're talking about recruiting new board members, there's a few areas that we need to look at. First of all is attitude. Do they have the proper attitude? Are they someone who's going to fit with the group that we have? It doesn't mean everyone has to agree on everything, but you also don't want problems inside your organization that you can't move forward in different areas. So look at the attitude of the person that you're looking to bring in. Let's look at bylaw directives. Let's make sure there's nothing written into our bylaws that affect who we're going to recruit or who we're going to look at. Sherry, there's a prime example of one of the nonprofits that we work with in town.
It's a homeless shelter whose board their bylaws say that 1/3 of their board has to be made up of formerly homeless people.
Now, some people say, why would they do that? So they have a better perspective on the programs that they're working on. Remember, in Section 1, we talked about who's responsible for the programs. It's the board. They have the responsibility to make sure the programs are brought in and in line with the mission statement and with the direction of the organization through their strategic plan. If you have someone on your board who has a better understanding of the programs or the needs of the individuals you're trying to serve, your programs are going to be that much stronger and that much better. We also need to avoid those with conflict of interest. Okay? If that situation can arise, you need to leave them out of the recruitment process. If you have a friend or someone that you trust as an attorney and would want to use them in your organization, then don't ask them to be on your board unless they can volunteer their services. If they can volunteer their services at no charge to you, that's fine. If that individual cannot, then that's a person you may want to talk to about being on a subcommittee. They can still be part of your organization. They can still help give you direction, but they cannot be on the board if they're going to be paid for their services they will provide or could possibly provide at some time. And make sure that we're looking for board members that can help us to achieve our strategic goal. If we're not moving forward, it's not any good. We also need to be looking for board members who can commit the time. As Sherry spoke about in our contract, let's give them a time commitment. This is what we're looking for from you. We're looking for 5 to 10 hours a week. We're looking for 5 to 10 hours a month to be committed toward the organization. Next, when we're recruiting, we do not have to recruit a big name. A big name in a community does not all of a sudden make your organization legitimate. And as some people say, with big names can come big problems, can come big egos. That does not mean if there is someone who is a celebrity type in your area that wants to work with your organization, that doesn't mean that you don't want them. It just means you should not be going after them because they are not going to legitimize your organization. Value diversity. We need to make sure that we're bringing in lots of different people and lots of different capacities when we're looking at a program. We talk about the homeless shelter that requires 1/3 of their board to be formerly homeless individuals. Why do they do that? To have better programs. If we're working on programs to work with inner city youth, we should find people who have experience there. If we have a group of people who are only from the suburbs, do they really understand the problems, the issues, and maybe best how to reach inner city children? No. We need to make sure we're bringing in a diverse group of people to get lots of different perspectives.
I would add, too, that one of the things you want to look at is age. It's interesting that when we do the board member recruitment grid, that I'm being shameless here, that is also part of the Field Guide to Operating Your Nonprofit. Often what we see is that there are people mostly over 40 are what we're looking at with board members. We miss the 20 and 30-year-old crowd. And I have to say, from our office perspective, we have several college interns who bring so much to what we do. They understand technology in a way that those of us who have a few more years don't have. They bring a lot of freshness. If you're working with youth organizations, having some 20-year-old people on your board who understand the culture a little bit better than some of the older people that we've tend to have in the past, it's important. Also, if you're working for a senior citizens organization and you have no senior citizens on your board, that might be a problem. And I want to throw out, too, One of the things that we talk about, quite frankly, is race. Most of the boards we work with have a tendency to not be very diverse. Across the board, we work with boards that are primarily African American, primarily Caucasian. It's shocking with the boards who are doing Hispanic outreach and don't have anyone of Hispanic descent on their board. You really need to look at that. We're reaching out to all age groups. Or all age groups and diversities. You want to make sure that's well represented on your board.
At this point, we have an activity that we would like you to discuss the diversity of your board and see what elements are missing.
Okay, now let's talk about the application process. We've looked at what we're having the materials in place and who it is we're looking at recruiting. Let's talk about what it looks like to have somebody come in. Having a process in place where we go through the same steps with each potential candidate will really be beneficial to you. So what we would suggest is that you first of all develop a list of potential board members. I'll tell you, my favorite place to start was in my list of donors, people who are already committed to your organization, attending your events, coming to your fundraising, giving money. That's a great place to start looking for board members. But we've looked at that recruitment grid, so you also want to look and see what are we missing. Are there areas of expertise we don't have? Do we have somebody who's good with accounting? Do we have somebody who knows fundraising? You want to look at those missing places. Do we have all age groups represented? So you want to start tossing out some names based on that recruitment grid that we're talking about. The first step then would be to have your board chairman contact potential board members. It's important to note here that if we look at who is responsible for recruiting board members, it is not the executive director. It is board members. Board members are responsible for recruiting new board members. So the board chair would contact the potential members and say, is this something that you're interested in? For those people who are interested, we're going to send them the board kit, which again has the application, some basic information about your organization, the contract, and the job description. You want to give people good information about what they're getting into. You don't want somebody who says, yes, I'll be on the board, and then finds out what it's about and backs off from that. Then the people who are interested in being board members will send you back the application. And all of the board members, or you could also have a subcommittee that it's a nominating committee that looks at the applications, but you're reviewing all of the applications side by side and with the same information available. You'll from that point decide, okay, from these applications, who do we want to be involved? And we'll invite those prospective board members to a board meeting. This is where we do an interview process. And so we're going to have them at the board meeting, see how they fit together with other people. Everybody gets a chance to ask them questions. And then they're going to leave the meeting. And at that time, you're going to have some discussion about, is this a good person? Is this a good fit? Personally, I don't think that's a good time to vote. I think everybody needs to sit on that until the next meeting, so that there are people who don't make decisions that way. They need some time to think and to process outside of everybody talking. And so I highly recommend you wait till the next meeting. And at that point, you would call the board member and say, okay, you've met us, or the potential board member. You've met us. Is this something you're interested in? And if they say yes, they are still interested. At that point, at the next meeting, you would hold your elections. And if you vote to accept this person, or don't actually, you're going to notify them, notify the potential of the decision of the board. And schedule board orientation. And that at the board orientation is when you're going to give them the manual. I highly recommend you do the board orientation at your location. It shocks me how often I meet board members who've never stepped foot in the organization that they're a board member for. So having board members come in and have a tour of the organization, get the board manual, answer questions is a good way to do that. Take a moment now and think about what is your current process for bringing on board members and what can be changed or improved.
At this time, we'd like to look at some board committees. What we're talking about are subcommittees inside our organization that help do the work for the board. So we're looking at a finance committee, a marketing committee, a fundraising committee, and a program committee. That doesn't mean you don't have more subcommittees on your board. These are just the main areas that we feel we need. Each board should have at least. When we talk about these committees, we need to look at some different things. First of all, we need to assign the individuals on these committees tasks to do. We talk about job descriptions. We look at that. There's nothing more frustrating than if we don't know what we're supposed to do and then to be held accountable for not getting it done. So we need to make sure we're clear and we give them, each committee, exact information of what we're looking for, what they should be doing to help move the organization forward. Each committee should have 2 to 3 board members on it. Since a board member is the only individual who's going to be able to take the information from the subcommittee back to the board for a vote, we need to make sure there's board members on each one of these and that the board is represented inside there. Now, each one of these committees will have a chairperson, and that chairperson is typically designated by the board chair. At CDP, we recommend that we limit each board member to a maximum of 2 committees. Why do we say this? Because we have 2 different scenarios that we look at. In certain circumstances, we see one individual who tries to be on every committee to try to help everything move forward because they feel like they can do the most effective job. We also see individuals who want to be on every committee to make sure they try to control every situation inside of the board. So to make sure we're not putting too much of a strain on anyone's time or ability, we recommend no more than 2 subcommittees per member.
I think it's also important to note at that time, we also don't want our organizations to be about any one person. Often we have the founder syndrome that comes up, and you have this founder who puts a few token board members on, but really I'm the one who's controlling everything. That's not a healthy way for your organization to be. I heard a story of a young woman who did just that. She had such a passion and such a heart to reach inner city kids and to provide lunch for them. She was a young 30-year-old dynamic woman who wanted to be in complete control of the organization she started. There were a few board members, but really they weren't involved. They weren't meeting regularly. But she did a tremendous job of building up this organization and had several hundred kids coming every day for lunch. And then she was tragically killed in a car accident. And the organization completely collapsed. And those kids were left without the help that they'd come to depend on. That is not what you want to do in your organization. We have to remember the slogan, it's not about me. It is about the betterment of this organization. And so the more people who are involved, we have one board member who's on every committee and controlling all the things that are going on. They're the person who knows about it all. And so we want to make sure that we're building organizations that are going to last past our lifetimes and to continue on and to help others for generations to come.
Absolutely. So now, as we said, we do have committee chairs that have been appointed by the board president. Those chairs would then bring progress reports from the subcommittee meetings to the board meeting to pass along information or progress on a situation, or to bring information when they're ready to have a situation called to vote. This is a prime area to recruit non-board members to help. This is where you may have that friend who's the attorney or the accountant that you may need their services to be paid for. Or this is an individual that you know has a passion for what you do, but cannot commit the 5 to 10 hours that you need monthly. This is a prime spot to allow that individual to become involved and allow them to help your organization move forward. When we're talking about these committees, you should consider placing any relevant staff members on a committee. When we're talking about programs, this is what's so important. We go way back and we talk about, we said the board is responsible for the programs, the board is responsible for the funding. That only makes sense to put those 2 together. But if we have staff who has relevant information about how a program should look or a new program that we're trying to develop, then we need to get that person involved. That goes through the proper channels to make sure that everybody understands their roles and how that person is going to be assisting the organization, but make sure you consider that.
I think we want to say again, too, in the first section we talked about the structure of an organization where we basically have the board who oversees the executive director, and the executive director oversees all the other staff and volunteers. So the area of staff members on subcommittees is a place we have to be really careful. Remembering again that board members are not giving staff members direction. They are serving in the capacity of a subcommittee. The subcommittee is making a recommendation to the entire board. When the board votes on that recommendation, the executive director would then go back to the staff members and give them their duties out of that. We've got to keep that chain of communication really clear. Another area we want to talk about with subcommittees is chartering committees. We have mentioned programs and finance and some other committees when we first started this section. Those are traditionally standing committees who are going to be there all the time. You're always going to want a finance committee. One of the roles of the finance committee is submitting your budget to the board, and so you're going to want that every year. So finance committee is going to be there over and over again. That's what your standing committees are. Your ad hoc committees are temporary committees. I remember back when we were looking at going medical, adding medical services for the organization that I was with, we basically, that came about that I was the one doing all the research on going medical. And after I took this training, I thought, wow, how much sense would it have made to have had a medical subcommittee where we had doctors and insurance agents and people who knew OSHA requirements, the things I really did not know as an executive director. And so an example of how we would have done that was to have brought that medical committee together and all the people who had the expertise we needed to make recommendations. And that committee would have been in place until such a time as we made that transition. So there are other areas like that there might be times, for instance, if you're doing an extensive remodeling, you may want to have a remodeling subcommittee who are going to be just a temporary committee until that job is done. So that's the difference between standing committees and ad hoc committees. In each case, no matter what kind of committees you have, if they're standing or they're temporary, it is so important to list the desired outcomes. We're talking more there with the temporary committees and saying, what is this? How long is it going to be there? This committee is going to exist from August of 2010 until December of 2015 when we complete that project. We're looking at making those, and this is the result of that committee. Here's how we're going to know when it's time for this temporary committee to not be there anymore. But I do think it's important to note that whether you're standing or an ad hoc committee, we want to have those lists of desired results. We've all been in meetings where we come and we sit down and nobody knows what they're doing. It's so important to assign the tasks. It's also important to list the resources available to the committee. So if we're talking about, we have this one-time committee to do a renovation project on a building, we anticipate it's going to take 18 months. So that's what we're looking at. This committee is going to be there for 18 months. Where you have that much money, here's the volunteers we have. We have this building association who's willing to come in and do some labor for free. So it's not just the financial piece that we have there, but also how many volunteers we have, any in-kind contributions we have toward this project. They need to know what resources are available. So, and also specifying the term of committee leadership. How long are they going to be in this role? So our committee chairmen, are they there for the life of it, or is that a one-year role? What I would say is, if you have an accountant on your board, it doesn't make sense to move them from your finance committee to your programs committee just because their year expired. You want to keep that person where they're the most knowledgeable and where they can do the most benefits for your organization. The last thing is staffing the committee. When you put together a committee, it is not necessarily just that committee's responsibility to recruit some non-board members. The board as a whole should be saying, hey, I have a friend who works in development or contract or whatever it is you're looking for. So the whole board should be saying, here are the people we think should be a part of that project.
So at this time, we'd like you to take a moment to identify the current committees the organization has and who's serving on them. Then, who from the committee could be recruited to better fill the roles or complete the committees that we have out there.